Chapter 10. The investigation begins. In March of 2001, I was the video camera operator for 3 cell extractions that took place on Facility DR. On video and before the cell extraction, each officer had to identify themselves, give their badge number, and state their specific job during the extraction. My taping caught an officer named Michael Ruiz flashing a gang sign that looked like a W. It was later determined as a symbol for the green wall. As a result, Officer Ruiz was removed from the Special Emergency Response Team, CERT, and put under investigation by Internal Affairs Sergeant Azel Middlebrooks. Rumors began to swirl that I told on him to the administration concerning his hand gestures. Rather than confronting me about the issue, Officer Ruiz did nothing but hold a grudge towards me. I knew the investigation on Officer Ruiz would be the start of me being a marked man at the prison. The change in my co-workers' attitudes towards me was extremely obvious. Cold shoulders, stale greetings, avoidance of eye contact, rushed small talk, if any, and an overall feeling of isolation. One day during my annual range training, as I entered the classroom to sign in, Officer Ruiz quickly proceeded to the back room where the other range instructors were, told them of my presence, and instructed them to talk about something else. Clearly, he was holding me responsible for his removal from CERT. In another incident with Ruiz, his resentment towards me grew bolder. As I approached the handle baton training area, Officer Ruiz made a slash motion across the neck to another officer as I passed by. When I asked him why he did it, he ignored me and walked away. I knew this problem was only going to get worse. I was not going to stand for continued harassment, nor wait for bolder acts of aggression to begin. I documented everything that happened at the range and brought a copy of my report to the Employee Relations Office. I gave it to Lieutenant Vertus Elmore, who worked directly for the warden. Then, one particular evening, I hopped on one of the golf carts that transported officers to the exit at the prison's main entrance. A few other officers were headed in my direction, so I asked the driver to stop and signal for them to hop on. "Go ahead, we'll wait for you to come back and pick us up." And there it was, the confrontation that I was officially an outcast. I was considered a rat, enemy. The green wall was growing tremendously at the prison, and the rebellious behavior was out of control. They placed contraband in inmate cells, used unnecessary force at will, and became middlemen for drug and weapons transfers within the prison. Any staff members who attempted to interfere with their actions were verbally threatened and/or had their vehicle damaged. Flattened tires, and more commonly GW or 723, was keyed onto their car. 723 stood for the 7th letter of the alphabet, G, and the 23rd letter of the alphabet, W, initials of the Green Wall. Although correctional officers belonging to the Green Wall followed the code of silence, an unspoken agreement in which they would not disclose or report the inappropriate and illegal activity of other correctional officers, how they were conducting their business against inmates and staff was not no secret. Soon after, the Office of the Inspector General, OIG, initiated an administrative investigation into allegations of misconduct against 4 California Department of Corrections correctional officers assigned to the ISU at the prison. The allegations were made by an inmate named Ricardo Teliz, who was the shot caller for Facility C Yard. The 4 officers were to be investigated for using unnecessary and/or excessive force against Teliz during a cell search on April 3, 2001. Teliz also alleged that these officers planted an inmate-manufactured weapon in the cell, falsified reports, and stole property belonging to him during the search. Lieutenant Robert Kim of the Internal Affairs Unit at the prison phoned the Office of the Inspector General and asked if they wanted to conduct their own independent investigation into the matter. The OIG accepted the offer. In a videotaped interview conducted by Lieutenant Mark Treadwell, inmate Ricardo Teliz alleged that ISU officers Walter Faulkner, Michael Lashkov, Anthony Ivanich, and Fernando Chavez used unnecessary and/or excessive force on him during a cell search on April 3, 2001. According to his inmate CDC 602 grievance report, the 4 named officers rushed into his cell, throwing him to the ground, and stuck their knee into his back and neck area. They then twisted his legs until he screamed in horrific pain. Teliz also claimed that he was in mechanical restraints, handcuffs, and that he was not resisting when all this took place. As a result of the independent investigation, the charges were sustained by the OIG. The officers were found guilty and the report was forwarded to the California Department of Corrections for disciplinary action. At this point in time, I was working in the vehicle sally port, checking incoming and outgoing vehicles that entered the prison. I received a phone call one day from Officer Garcia telling me that Officer Gibbons, Vice President of the prison's union, was walking around with a special agent from the Office of Internal Affairs from Sacramento. The investigator was going around to each officer's station and asking them if they ever heard of the Green Wall. He informed me that if I said yes, they would record my name and question me further. He then instructed me to say no, that I had never heard of the Green Wall. The special agent never stopped by the vehicle sally port. One morning at my usual stop by the watch office on the way to the sally port, Lieutenant G. Lewis, who was now assigned to the ISU as the Internal Affairs Lieutenant, said he needed to speak to me. We also transferred to Salinas Valley State Prison together with our families, and we both lived at Lake Nacimiento, often carpooling with each other to the prison. Lieutenant Lewis was aware of my strong background with the ISU. He sat down in his chair, pulled a document out from his top drawer, and pushed it toward me, asking me to read it. I knew I was not authorized to read the document, and I told him that, at which point he stated firmly that he wanted me to read it. The document was the California Department of Corrections Form 989, an Internal Affairs investigation request. Lieutenant Lewis wanted a Category 2 investigation, meaning that Sacramento would conduct an investigation from the Office of Internal Affairs and not Salinas Valley State Prison itself. An outside agency performing the investigation avoided a feared internal cover-up. I grabbed the document, slumped back into my chair, and began to read. Their narrative read as follows. On June 27, 2001, Salinas Valley State Prison ISU Lieutenant Lewis summarized his review of documents and information surrounding the group of SV-SP staff who associate themselves with the number 723, which stands for the Green Wall. The following are recent incidents that have occurred at SVSP, showing the group is active and growing in numbers. In January 2001, several staff had signed their FSLAs with green ink, a symbol of association or support of the group. Sometime after Lieutenant Lewis's assignment to the ISU, he observed a security squad officer with a box of green ink pens on his desk with a sign that read, "Take one if you dare." On May 29, 2001, it was discovered that security squad officers had brought a green-colored knife into the institution as a gift for the departing ISU sergeant. Engraved on the knife was the number 723. After removal of the involved staff from ISU, there have been reports of vandalized vehicles. When the 723 group was first identified in 1999, there was an unconfirmed concern that the Green Wall stood for the code of silence and that members practiced intimidation of other staff. The only sign of the group's activity were some management memos and facility property that had 723 written on them in some green ink. This investigation is requested to determine if this group has involved itself in acts of misconduct and if they are a threat to the safety and security of the institution. Lewis informed me that our prison's warden Anthony Lamarque, refused to sign off on the internal affairs investigation, so Chief Deputy Bobby Warden Hernandez, second in command, signed for Lamarque. I was curious. Lamarque must have been hiding something concerning the Green Wall, but I could not put my finger on it. Why wouldn't he sign off on something as serious as this? The Category 2 investigation request was approved by the Assistant Director of the Office of Internal Affairs. Lewis then asked me to document what I had seen and the phone call I received from Officer Garcia, telling me to answer no if I ever was questioned about knowing about the Green Wall. Staff feared Lieutenant Lewis, and no one wanted to give him any information. Although he shouldn't have been sharing this information with me, we knew that with my strong background in the ISU and years of experience in the California Department of Corrections, I was a credible source. My documentation of happenings would be crucial evidence in this report. I didn't like this. I hated the situation I had been placed in, but I couldn't ignore my ethical beliefs. Officers were abusing their power and going against the oath they had taken. I honored my badge and everything it stood for. I knew what I had to do.